Hi, I'm Mr. Elon, and welcome to the last mini lecture on the technical use of the camera and composition packet. We're going to be talking about set 6 as well as the test. And I'll only briefly talk about the test. The test is 20 questions. It's 10 questions that cover composition and 10 questions that cover technique. Basically, a lot of people use this page right here, the checklist page on the back of the packet. You can also use the website as well as the internal aspects of the packet to study for the test. But pretty much anything that is on the test is going to be on this back page. Some of it might be in shorthand in the other notes column. But honestly, if you've been here the whole time, if you've done everything and you're caught up with the packet, if you feel like you have understood everything and you take some time the night before to study, whatever that means for you, whether you're reading, watching videos, practicing, whatever, most people who are engaged with this unit do very well on the test. It's not really out to trick you, although it definitely is a test that you want to read all of the questions. There are some pictures on the test when you're being asked about composition. It might show several pictures of cute puppies and ask you which of them best fits the rule of thirds, for instance. And you might be able to make an argument for how, this one, that one, or the other one sort of aligns with it, but there's only going to be one that is the clear best answer, which means you do have to know the content. To close things out, set 6 is fully manual mode, and even though I don't have as much to say about it, it's kind of like a culminating final exercise. It might take you, the photographer, a little bit more time because in terms of the technical side of things, you're shooting in fully manual mode. So what that means is, going back to the exposure triangle here, with shutter speed and aperture, with the priority of either one from sets 4 or 5, you could set the aperture a certain way and it would set the shutter speed to match it. Now you can set the aperture a certain way and it's not going to change the shutter speed at all unless you tell it to. That means you could very well end up with a bad exposure that's like too light or too dark, or when you start involving ISO is too grainy, or when you start involving manual focus, which is the fourth thing you're going to have to contend with. It just doesn't look like it's focused on the right thing or doesn't look focused at all. So you're going to have to take some time and tinker with it. If you're using your camera and you have a DSLR, you're going to find that your controls are a little less tedious than our classroom cameras, but it's still very doable. What you're going to do first is you're going to turn this dial on the top to the M. That is fully manual. That is to say that you're not going to switch the dial to the AV for aperture and then to the TV for shutter speed. It doesn't work like that. So you got to keep it on the M the whole time. And then here's an image of the back of one of our cameras. And it doesn't show the LCD screen, but basically what's going to happen is this. You're going to have the shutter speed down here, you're going to have the aperture down here, and then the other two things that you're going to have to mess with, ISO and manual focus, you're going to have to use these controls right here. So the first thing you're going to want to do is engage manual focus by pushing left on the function set dial. You push left and then you're going to kind of scroll over to MF and engage it with the function set button. And once you've done that, you're going to find that pressing this plus minus key is going to jump you from manual focus in the top left to shutter speed in the top right, to shutter speed in the bottom left, to aperture in the bottom right, or toward the bottom right. And you can kind of just jump back and forth between those. And then anytime you want to change one, you're going to just rotate this dial just like you did with shutter and aperture priority. Now, it'll show you kind of a preview image of what it thinks the exposure is going to turn out to be, just based on the level of light that it's seeing, which means you can kind of, before you even click the button, you can kind of jump back and forth between different settings and be fine. Finally, we have ISO. I talked briefly about that in the last video tutorial. It's important to understand that, once again, ISO should be thought of as secondary to the other two. A lower ISO is almost always ideal, and the reason is it gets noisy when you raise it. The ISO is the sensitivity of the sensors, and when the sensors are working overtime with a higher ISO, they're pulling in weird little artifacts of light from kind of all over the place, and they're just generally doing a sloppier, messier job, just like you when you rush to like finish a homework that you forgot to do. So you kind of always want to start with the ISO lower, and then basically, if you're trying to, raise the shutter speed or lower the aperture or something like that, and it's getting darker in a way that you can't recover, if you're focusing on shutter speed and you can't recover with aperture, that's when you start bumping the ISO up. So truth be told, like, the lowest ISO is in most cases only fit for shooting in direct sunlight. Not that you couldn't, but you'd have to really compromise with shutter speed, especially to get an image to turn out in like artificial light with like an ISO of 80 or something like that. So if you're hovering around 400 or 200 to start, that's perfectly fine. To manipulate the ISO, here's another comparison. It's a little harder to see. Oh, this one just kind of shows that if the ISO is low, it's going to generally take a darker picture in a dark lighting situation. But that noise and grain is the thing that you want to avoid. Again, unless you like want it to look like that for some reason, but you'd have to have a really good reason for that. Like, I want this to look like a horror movie or something like that. So to engage the ISO, oops, I got two of these open. To engage the ISO, you're just going to push up on this, and then you'll see sometimes a little meter, sometimes it'll be at the bottom, but you just kind of go up and down or roll the dial to pick your different ISOs. When you take your pictures in manual mode, I am going to ask you, when you show me the pictures, to show me that you know how to do manual mode. So you can't just like take it in auto mode and then show it to me and expect me to think that you did it. And then otherwise, I expect the image to not necessarily be perfect in terms of like a photographic art critique, but I expect it to be very visible. In terms of composition with manual mode, you're not doing anything specific. What you're doing is combining things from before. So you're going to be combining the concepts of simplicity, emphasis, rule of thirds, balance, unity, movement, lines, depth, layers, and framing, and really anything else. Any principles of design, anything else you may have picked up along the way that you can cite as being a solid compositional strategy. You want to be combining those things so that each photo is going to have at least two of the things we've learned about or things you've picked up that you can identify. So some examples, and part of the purpose of this is to just say, composition isn't just pick one. It's a series of ideals, and you can have a photograph that essentially features all of the ones that we've gone over in class. This example right here definitely shows unity of color, and at the same time with this implied line here, it's showing the rule of thirds. Now you might say unity of color, it's like all the blue and purple are up here and all the orange is down here, but that's not actually true. There are like echoes of the orange happening in the clouds, and there are echoes, kind of reflective echoes of the blue on the roof and the purple sky color on the front of this building. This one kind of features a lot. This one features depth, layers, and framing, with this framing in on, everything back here. It features movement and lines, with these like diagonals and this rhythm. And, that's another thing that's mentioned, is rhythm. And then it also features a sense of unity, especially if you squint your eyes. If I back out, there's a sense that like the blacks are kind of popping up everywhere. The whites are kind of popping up everywhere. And there is a rich range of grays happening all over the place. Just a couple more quick examples. This one combines the rule of thirds and movement and lines. and this one combines the rule of thirds and radial balance, which we didn't specifically call too much attention to, but like the idea that rhythm can kind of wrap around things, center on things, or draw attention toward one spot. I mean, that's kind of part of unity, but that often has to do with like a feeling of balance as well. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Usually there are a couple days when we get this far into it and just, ask me in class if I don't already offer it, but usually there are a couple days to let people kind of polish things off and have some time and space to ask questions, especially those that may pertain to the test. Good luck with the last set. Good luck on the test, and I'll see you in class.